about 90+% of all information on the subject is embedded information. I even know who it's coming from and how they're doing it.
Does Lockheed Martin, or does anybody, possess working anti-gravity technology right now? Or are we still trying to understand how these ET craft are working? Have we reverse engineered the technology at Roswell successfully? Which would mean some of the UFOs we're seeing now that are silent and hovering.
I've given you the Lazar tapes, and that's as far as I can talk.
Okay.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
That's good.
It's only because I got the Lazar tapes from a White World forum.
Right.
And
but you can't say anymore.
Well, people kept encroaching on Area 51, such that Area 51 is now being moved to Tooele, Utah. And here was one of the old-time developments.
Oh.
Now, I happen to know the guy who put that together.
How far does this date back? March? No, Mach 1.2?
I know it doesn't say, but in actuality, it's way, way back. The first, we must be at least 30 to 40 years.
60s? After the Roswell crash, in the first week of July of 1947, it is alleged that the alien bodies in the craft are taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. That's where the alien bodies in the craft were taken. What Boyd Bushman is holding up is a document that states that a reverse-engineered, nuclear-powered flying saucer that has a ceiling of over 60,000 feet, a range of 3,000 miles, nuclear-powered, anti-gravity saucer, that we reverse-engineered from the alien craft, and he knows who did it.
So by 1994, and it was later confirmed to us later in 94 and 95, then when Rockefeller hosted the Clintons, and there's that famous picture of Hillary Clinton holding the book about extraterrestrial intelligence at the Rockefeller Ranch when they were visiting out there. You know, yeah. Okay, so she actually is the one who stood up and stopped the briefing and said it's too dangerous. We're not going to pursue this. And ultimately, politicians are going to put their finger in the air and they're going to see which way the winds are blowing and see what they can benefit from. They saw this as a lose-lose situation. In other words, it was a situation where if they were to push on this, they would be stepping on some very big toes. Very, very big toes. How big? Several $100 trillion of world economic activity. Now let me back this up now. So the how is hard for some people to wrap their mind around when it comes to this kind of secrecy, but the why is the pièce de résistance. Because if you look at what these projects that are unacknowledged special access projects are doing, what they really have been doing has been trying to acquire, as this top secret Canadian document, the Wilbur-Smith document in 1951 states, the modus operandi, the mechanism of action of these extraterrestrial vehicles, meaning the technology, the science and technology. Because if you're interstellar, you're not using Exxon Jet A fuel. You're not using a rocket like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic is using. You're not using something like the space shuttle. You're using some technologies that are the trans-dimensional end of physics, very high energy electromagnetic field propulsion systems that allow you to drop out of 3D space and appear at another point in space by going through other dimensions. Okay? Now, you can do that without going trans-dimensional by just creating energy from the so-called zero-point field and creating an anti-gravity effect, so you have lifters so that you can go 100,000 miles per hour, make a right-hand turn with no deceleration effect because you've created a bubble in space-time that corrects for one gravity. That's what a lot of the, quote, UFOs are that people see being test flown out near Nellis and the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, and et cetera and so on. We mastered gravity control October 1954. I was not a twinkle in my father's eye. Most of you weren't born at that point. I wasn't. And that is when we mastered gravity control. How do I know this? The third highest ranking official at the Naval Research Labs, the largest defense lab for the Department of Defense here in Washington, has been a friend for years, and he was in the vault and saw the documentation for this, unredacted, because it's all the original documents, and that was the date. So we have not needed jet engines, rockets, oil, gas, public utilities, surface roads, think about this, steamships, internal combustion engines of any sort for at least 60 years. And if you really go back to the earlier part of the century, we're just plain free energy from Tesla type things, 100 years. But you're stepping on a stockpile of money and commodities and mineral wealth being traded, oil, coal, other uranium, that's worth, in the aggregate, several $100 trillion. The U.S. federal budget is $3 or $4 trillion. And if you take out entitlements and things that are mandatory, it's a fraction of that. So it's the tail is wagging the dog here. So the financial interest, the petrodollar interest, the big commodity trading firms like Goldman Sachs, and the big money folks, that's where the action is. And those are the masters, not the president, not the Congress, not the UN Secretary General, certainly, not the Prime Minister of England, etc. So let's just like pull the mask off and just admit that we're living in a period of petro-oligarchs, kleptocrats, klepto meaning theft, like a kleptomaniac, kleptocrats, and that this sort of myth of free markets and a free society and an open and free democracy is just a myth. Because our democracy was hijacked decades ago. Now, on trivial issues like the marginal tax rate or whether you're going to raise or lower payments for Social Security, the President and Congress can fight about that, and it's sort of this show going on, a whirling dervish show of nonsense that goes on. On these issues, they don't want those clowns, is how they view it, dealing with it. So this permanent, unacknowledged covert program has put a lead ceiling in. And only rarely does anything bubble up from there, or down, I should say, to the body politic out of these unacknowledged special access projects. Yes?
What do we have in any of our encounters with medical technology that's been sequestered?
You asked the question, what do we have that has come about through some of these research projects and encounters that are medically related? A lot. My understanding is that if the technologies that deal with regenerative capabilities exist, transdimensional, that are sequestered, where you could actually regenerate spinal column or a severed limb and nerves, things of this sort, cancer, other diseases. But the problem is those use technologies that are transdimensional. What do I mean by that? They use subtle energy technologies that aren't just kind of like acupuncture, but I mean that are electromagnetic systems that are very, very high tech. Almost like in Star Trek where they wave a thing, but that would actually work reliably. But there too, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in pharmaceutical and conventional medical. There's agribusiness, medi-business, military-industrial complex. A lot of toes would be stepped on. But also, more importantly than that, is that if you open a window into an application that's medical related to these technologies, people are going to see the energy implications of it. And with that, it's goodbye oil. It's goodbye coal. So they've been sequestered for the same reason the energy and propulsion technology. Yes, I understand from men and women I've worked with that there are amazing technologies that relate to medical systems and curative and reparative, regenerative technologies that are trans-dimensional electronic systems that would just blow your mind. Yeah, and so unfortunately, you know, in a sense, our medical system is sort of Stone Age from that point of view.
But there is medical information that can help.
Yes, there's medical information that can help. And one of the things I've said, there are multiple, look at this whole issue of disclosure. First, there's the basic information, we're not alone in the universe. Then there's the fundamental technology, energy, propulsion. And then there are all the ancillary or associated technologies. You know, medical, environmental abatement. Ken Shoulders, who was a scientist, discovered charged clusters that would, under right conditions, neutralize radioactive material. So you could take all the radioactive waste in the world and neutralize it. This was proven. And the Department of Energy was going to fund the next level of it, and the people in this cabal circled their limousines and said, no, you will not. Because it was pulling energy from this quantum vacuum 0 point to do it. I know the people who are part of that initiative, all of them. So there are so many spin-offs and benefits of disclosure of this central issue, but that's the reason it's secret, is that the implications are so huge. It's not just the energy sector or the transportation sector. It's the medical, it's the pharmaceutical, it's all of it. But, you know, would 99.999% of humanity benefit if it was used peacefully? Now, there's a big caveat. If it was used peacefully, yes. The bigger question becomes, as a colonel who was in charge of future technologies for the Air Force, and I discussed here in DC not long ago, what if they're weaponized? I said, well, they already have been, haven't they? But they're covertly weaponized. But what if they proliferate and are weaponized? So this gets into sort of the larger question, evolutionary question of, are we willing to go forward as a peaceful civilization or not? Because we are at a crossroads where if we don't go forward peacefully, we won't go forward at all.